In today's class, I will break down and explain the hows, whys, and whats concerning true Sabbath and the day of worship. I will answer these questions. How do we know which month is the first month? Who changed the Sabbath day and why? And how do we tell which day is the seventh day, the Sabbath, the day of worship? Now, there are so many questions surrounding which day is the correct day to worship the Most High. There is so much controversy around this one particular subject, but it is so simple, yet we get it wrong all the time. So we're going to take our time, we're going to get into the scriptures, and we're going to open up the word and show word for word what the Most High instructed His people, Israel, to do. Not the rest of the world, His people, Israel. So follow along as we break down and get a better understanding on which day is the correct day and how do we know what day that is.
And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord.
Let us begin. How do we know which month is the first month?
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. The beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. The whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. It is the Lord's Passover.
So which month is the first month?
Spring gets its name from the plants springing forth. Mostly, we measure the spring by the change in the weather.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you.
Now, before we move on, I have some very interesting news to share with you. Are you ready for this? Okay, let's take a trip back in time before the days of Moses. Let's go back in time to the days of Noah.
And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. In the first month, in the first month, in the first month, in the first month. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry.
Here we see in the book of Genesis chapter 8 that it shows that the first month is when Noah was allowed to come out of the ark. Hence, fresh, new beginnings, spring, everything is new. Now, we all know that the world, not the Bible, the world, say the new year begins in January.
Aaron, cast down my staff before Pharaoh.
Dennis.
Dennis.
He's not a man. He's the holy half-dead who's seen the Underverse.
We know that the new year does not begin in January according to the Bible. So basically, the way how the Most High set everything up, spring, summer, fall, winter. Not in the confused state that the world have it. Backwards. Winter first, really? Spring, summer, and then fall? No. In the correct order that the Most High has created. Everything from a fresh start.
Spring, summer, Fall. Winter.
In that order. Who changed the Sabbath day and why?
Vespasian returned to Rome in October AD 70. His triumphal procession recorded on the Arch of Titus, a monument to the humiliation of the Jews. Riches plundered from the Jewish temples became the starter capital for a new Rome. Fire and civil war had devastated the city. Now the enormous wealth of Judea would fill her empty coffers.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand.
It is 330, and Constantine, the new emperor of Rome, having united both East and West after the split between East and West under the Tetrarchy. Not long after coming to the throne, and not long after uniting both East and West, but he wanted to found a new Rome.
Oportis vos esse, as it's officially stated in documents. Up to this moment, they shouldn't be. They weren't allowed to exist. They weren't allowed to confess their faith. Otherwise, they would be persecuted. But now they were allowed to call themselves Christians and practice their religion along with the official paganism. The Edict of Milan explicitly says something like this, that Christians are free just as members of other religions to practice their religious beliefs in the way they prefer. So in that sense, this is one of the oldest documents, or perhaps the very first document, with such a broad perspective, since it dealt with the entire Roman Empire, promoting freedom of religion.
Jerusalem has been conquered, and Israel is no more. Rome is now in power, and now here is the beginning of a new world religion, where Israel now has been forgotten. Hence, the change is coming, and the change is now here. The change of all systems, including the calendar.
The story of early Christianity is a story of struggle, persecution, and martyrdom, often at the hands of the ruling government. Yet less than 300 years after the founding of the Church, Emperor Constantine adopted Christianity as the official religion of the most powerful empire the world had ever known. Who was Constantine, and why did he claim to be a Christian? At the dawn of the 4th century, Constantine began his ascent in both power and prestige. He was proclaimed emperor in AD 306, and by AD 324, he had solidified control over the entire Roman Empire. And in the following year, he called the First Council of Nicaea. This council formally established a number of doctrinal changes that had been adopted in practice over the previous 2 centuries. The nature of God and the celebration of Easter were 2 key items on the agenda. It was Constantine's prior signing of the Edict of Milan that eventually brought peace after more than 2 centuries of religious persecution. To understand the scope of this change in philosophy, we must first look back to the beginning in the 1st century. The persecution of Christians by the Roman Empire started under the rule of Emperor Nero. More than 200 years later, by the end of the 3rd century, rank persecution of Christians had become commonplace throughout the empire. Christians who refused to recant their faith and worship both the emperor and Roman pagan gods were tortured and killed. In the mid-3rd century, under the rule of Decius, an edict was issued that forced those claiming to be Christians to either worship Roman gods or face execution. Decius's religious campaign was intended to restore the empire to its former glory by uniting everyone under their ancestral religion. How then did Roman society's opinion of Christianity change so significantly to culminate in Constantine's adopting the religion? The answer to this lies in the vast changes that took place in Christian practices between the 1st and 4th century. Over time, the leaders of the church began accepting or at least tolerating new doctrine. In the 2nd century, Clement of Alexandria left a vast body of work that, according to Justo L. Gonzalez in Volume 1 of The Story of Christianity, Clement uses the Greek doctrine of logos to call Christians to be open to truth and philosophy. The 2nd century Bishop of Rome, later known as Pope Victor I, is well known for the Quartodeciman controversy, where he pushed for the excommunication of Christians who kept Passover as opposed to the adopted pagan fertility festival held on Sunday, later known as Easter. Victor sent out a letter to be distributed among all the Christian churches where he warned that the Lord's resurrection from the dead should be celebrated on no other day than on Sunday. In response to this instruction, Polycrates, the Bishop of Smyrna, wrote that he kept the Passover on the 14th of the month according to the Gospel, without deviating from, but following the rule of faith. Threats do not frighten me, for greater ones than I have said God must be obeyed rather than men. Tertullian of Carthage was an early Christian author around the turn of the 3rd century. He was influenced by Stoic philosophy, and it was his writings on the concept of God being a trinity that eventually became the hallmark of orthodoxy. The Christian faith underwent a dramatic transformation, adopting pagan practices and symbolism such as that of the ancient Egyptian symbol of life, which was used to picture the cross. The religion had changed so much that by the time Constantine ordered his soldiers to use this symbol on their shield on the eve of the Battle of Milvian Bridge in AD 312, Christianity had become fully immersed in pagan practices and traditions. Having been raised as a pagan devotee of the unconquered sun, Constantine's adoption of the transformed Christian faith effectively blended his ancestral pagan religion with what Christianity had become. Constantine seems to have thought that the unconquered sun and the Christian God were compatible, perhaps two views of the same supreme deity. On March 7th, AD 321, Constantine declared that, "On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed." Sunday worship, as opposed to Sabbath day observance, was later canonized by the Council of Laodicea in AD 363. It was Constantine who gave the stamp of approval for all the transformation that took place between the 1st and 4th centuries. Unlike Decius, who sought to unite the empire under paganism, Constantine managed to unite the empire under the guise of Christianity. He effectively set the stage for all the faux Christian practices you see emanating from Rome today. Dr. William Durant wrote in Volume 3 of The Story of Civilization, "Christianity did not destroy paganism, it adopted it." The divine trinity, personal immortality of reward and punishment, the adoration of mother and child, Christianity was the last great creation of the ancient pagan world. If you have ever wondered why the Catholic Church and the Protestant offshoots observe religious events and practices that are not found in the Bible, then you only need to look to Constantine and the steady adoption of pagan idolatry to find the source.
Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect,
Deserves no respect whatsoever.
And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. and they shall be given into his hand until the time and times and the dividing of time.
If you were considered to be an Israelite, you were now forced to stop worshiping the Most High on His day, the Sabbath, the seventh day. Instead, you were to take on the new Roman worship day. We were not supposed to follow anything that was Hebrew Israelite. We were not supposed to follow the new moon, nor the Shabbats, feast days, etc., etc. We were now supposed to follow what the world, at that time, the Roman Empire, the Catholic, have imposed, which today, the entire world has so many different days that they worship on. And all of these days are pagan. All of these days have nothing to do with the Creator and His original plan, the seventh day, the day of rest.
Constantine legalized Christianity because if you can't beat him, you might as well join him. He was losing his legionnaires. The legionnaires that were pushing Christians off the cliffs and killing them with swords and putting them in the arena to get eaten up. Because once a year, you had to show your allegiance to the emperor. And you showed your allegiance by walking through the forum, the city clerk, the guards, the Roman soldiers, a bowl of incense, you picked up a pinch, you just sprinkled it over a little fire, a little flame, a little altar, and said, Caesar is Lord, Kurios Caesar. And they handed you a slip of paper, you were legit for another year. Every citizen had to do that. The Pantheon, you ever been to Rome? The Pan, all Theon gods. Rome worshipped everyone.
Many Bible believers today have followed tradition handed down by previous generations. They believe and were taught that Sunday is the proper day of worship, that the Savior changed the day of worship from the Jewish Sabbath to Sunday. The adoption of Sunday as the Christian Sabbath has little to do with the Bible and everything to do with Constantine the Great over 300 years after the Messiah's death. Constantine was emperor of the Roman Empire from 306 to 337 CE. He was a sun worshipper who on his deathbed converted to Christianity. In 321 CE, while still a sun worshipper, Constantine established Sunday as the day of worship. He decreed,
On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed.
In this coin circulated by Constantine in 317 CE, we see the face of Constantine on one side, and on the other the figure of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. The sun god was also known as Mithras, and his birth was on December 25th. This date was adopted as the birth of Christ and became the date for Christmas many centuries later. Clearly, Constantine was an avid worshipper of the sun god Sol Invictus. Amazingly, Martin Luther, the champion of the modern-day Protestant movement, said,
"They allege that the Sabbath changed into Sunday, the Lord's Day, contrary to the Decalogue as it appears. Neither is there any example more boasted of than the changing of the Sabbath day. Great, say they, is the power and authority of the Church, since it dispensed with one of the 10 Commandments."
El séptimo día descansó. Lo que los judíos tenían y tienen, ¿no es cierto?, los observantes, como sagrado cumplir el Shabbat, un día a la semana.
Most professing Christians observe Saturday and Sunday as a day of worship. And yet the 10 Commandments include instructions to observe the seventh day.
Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. But the seventh day.
Seventh day. Day number 7.
Repeatedly offered $1,000 to anyone who can prove to me from the Bible alone that I am bound to keep Sunday holy. There is no such law in the Bible. It is a law of the Holy Catholic Church alone. The Bible says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." The Catholic Church says, "No, by my divine power I abolish the Sabbath day and command you to keep holy the first day of the week." And lo, the entire civilized world bows down in a reverent obedience to the command of the Holy Catholic Church. T. N. Wright, CSSR, in a lecture at Hartford, Kansas, February 18, 1884. "There is but one church on the face of the earth which has the power or claims power to make laws binding on the conscience, binding before God, binding under penalty of hellfire. For instance, the institution of Sunday. What right has any other church to keep this day? You answer by virtue of the 3rd commandment. The papacy changed the 4th commandment and called it the 3rd, which says, "Remember that thou keep holy the Sabbath day." But Sunday is not the Sabbath. Any schoolboy knows that. I have repeatedly offered $1,000 to anyone who will prove by the Bible alone that Sunday is the day we are bound to keep. And no one has called for the money. It was the Holy Catholic Church that changed the day of rest, the 7th day, to Sunday, the first day of the week. T. N. Wright, CSSR, in a lecture delivered in 1893.
My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
How do we tell which day is the 7th day, the Sabbath, the day of worship? The words of the Most High in the Scriptures make it so clear, so plain, so simple.
Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. But the seventh day.
Seventh day. Day number 7. It cannot get no clearer than that. So how do we know which day is day number 7? The Bible never said Saturday. It says seventh day. Can anyone open the Bible and search the scriptures and show me that it says Saturday is the seventh day? No? Can't find it? That's correct. You will never find it in the scriptures. For man named the days Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, after the gods of their own worship. But the Most High simply said, seventh day, day number 7. So, we are going to get into this study and figure out which day is day number 7. And I'm sure many of you can count from 1 to 10. So I'll make this as simple as possible. We're going to count from day number 1 all the way to day number 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light.
And the evening and the morning were the first day. The evening and the morning were the second day. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day.
Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made.
Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. But the seventh day.
Seventh day. Day number 7.
Now let's stomp 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ah, ah, ah.
What day is it today?
Why doeth one day excel another, when as all the light of every day in the year is of the sun? In other words, we cannot tell one day from another because the sun shines constantly. The sun shines every day the same. One day may be cloudy, the next day may be rainy, but no one can wake up and say, today is day number 1, day number 2, day number 3, unless you have been counting from the beginning. This is why we are given a starting point, and that starting point starts with the new moon. Okay, so let's say this. Let's say that we were stranded on an island or woke up out of a coma, and there's no one around. How can we tell what day is which? The sun is in charge of the day, the hours. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, all the way around, and it keeps going. And then at night, the moon comes out and gives her light. See, the moon is in charge of the month, the seasons. By the knowledge of the Lord, they were distinguished, and he altered seasons and feasts. So what does it mean to be altered? And he altered seasons and feasts. Okay, so the word altered right here represents the moon. Let's have a quick look at this. The moon is always changing. Unlike the sun that is constant, the moon is always changing.
You have a choice of 7 days of the week to name, but who named the days of the week? The most common form of timekeeping is the Gregorian calendar. First introduced in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII, the calendar has been widely adopted around the world to benefit global trade.
Global trade.
Back then, they believed that if you have more sunlight, you can work more hours. It's a slave system. The calendar was designed for commerce.
Yet this calendar is only one of as many as 40 calendars used today. The Gregorian calendar is no different. Originally based on the Julian calendar, which in turn was based on the Roman calendar, which again in turn was supposedly based on one of the classical Greek Hellenic calendars, of which there were many, the Gregorian calendar uses planetary names for each day of the week. The origin of the planetary names is based on the gods of Greco-Roman mythology.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And go not after other gods to serve them and to worship them, and provoke me not to anger with the works of your hands, and I will do you no hurt. In all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods, neither let it be heard out of thy mouth.
The English names of the week that we are most familiar with are derived from these same pagan gods, but differ in name due to a process called Interpretatio Germanica. According to John Lindow, in his book, Norse Mythology, A Guide to Gods, Heroes, Rituals and Beliefs, the Germanic peoples who undertook the translation seem to have relied on the Roman gods whose names the planets bore, and to have tried to equate those gods with their own. In the cases of Sunday and Monday, the translation was obvious. The other cases, however, were more difficult. Sunday in Latin, Dies Solis, or Sol, is probably the most obvious. It is literally the day of the sun. Sol Invictus was the Roman sun god, the same pagan deity that is worshipped at Christmas. Monday in Latin, Dies Lunae, or Luna, again is not too difficult to determine. It is the day of the moon. Luna is a Roman goddess and was seen as the female companion of Sol. Tuesday in Latin, Dies Martis, or Mars, is a bit harder to explain. The name Tuesday is derived from an Old English word, Tuesdag, or Tuesday. Tu was the Norse god of war, but in Latin the name of the god of war is Mars. So the day of the week, as well as the month of March and the red planet in our solar system, are all named after the Roman god of war. Wednesday in Latin, Dies Mercury, or Mercury, again is not so straightforward. The name Wednesday is derived from an Old English word, Wodensdag, or Woden's Day. Woden is one of the many different names and pronunciations for Odin, a Norse god, although some archaeologists have thought that Odin may well have been a historical figure. Tacitus, a 1st century AD Roman historian, identified the Germanic worship of Odin to the Roman worship of Mercury. Mercury was seen to be cunning and changeable, hence the word mercurial, and Odin was viewed in a similar way. Thursday in Latin, Dies Lovis, or Jupiter, is derived from an Old English name for Thor's Day. Thor is the more well-known Norse god of thunder, and Jupiter the Roman god of sky and thunder. Friday in Latin, Dies Veneris, or Venus, comes from the Old English word Fridag, or Friday. Fri is a Norse goddess and wife of Odin. The etymology of her name appears to mean dear, beloved, and one that is free. In comparison, Venus is the goddess of love, which would explain the association. Finally, the last day of the week is Saturday, or in Latin, Dies Saturni, or Saturn. Saturn was the Roman harvest god, and other linguistic roots point towards the Germanic deity, Satyr, who was a harvester of people.
Who was a harvester of people.
In the words of this author, the naming of the days of the week are steeped in idolatry. Our Western culture and the religious practices that are observed by the majority largely take root in pagan idolatry, and the question we hope you will ask yourself is, are you okay with that?
So, when examining your shiny new calendar, bear in mind that the days of the week in English and some other languages largely owe their names to the pantheon of Germanic and Norse gods.
In all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods, neither let it be heard out of thy mouth.
Out of thy mouth.
Okay, folks, settle down. I know it's a lot to take in. Trust me, I understand. This is a lot to take. We've been deceived for so long. Yes, I understand. The world is using these pagan names in place of the days that the Most High have created. And we were not instructed to be mentioned in these names. However, we do. We are supposed to go from day to day. Day number 1, day number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to number 7, the day of rest.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God.
So, to answer the question, how do we know which day is the seventh day? The first step is to sight the new moon. Have a starting point, and the starting point is the new moon. The new moon starts everything. Then we begin our count. So follow these steps right here. Step 1. We are supposed to look up and sight the new moon. Step 2. We're instructed to confirm it with witnesses. And step number 3. We are supposed to sound our trumpets, the shofar, to welcome in each month, especially every new year.
Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the God of Jacob.
Now that we see how to count, there should be no confusion moving forward.